How does one interpret a piece of evidence in a complex murder investigation? That is the issue Mentor Lawyer is tackling today. And as an example, we will use the infamous photo of Yindra, Wendy Adelson, and Katherine Magbanua at the beach in South Beach. This is another video in the Dan Markel murder series. In this video, we continue our reevaluation of the case and of the murder investigation, based on all of the new information that we have learned about the case. So let's talk about the photo first. Based on testimony at trial, it appears that the photo was taken on Father's Day of 2014, Sunday, June 15, 2014, about 33 days before Dan Markel was shot by a South Florida hitman. In the photo, we see three ladies lying down on the sand, looking ahead and smiling. Someone, we do not know whom, took the photo. It seems that the photo was taken at the beach, outside of the Adelsons' new luxury condominium at Resort Style Continuum on South Beach condominiums. The photo is significant because it shows a connection between Katherine Magbanua and Wendy Adelson, and because of its timing, right in between the hitman's first trip to Tallahassee to kill Dan Markel in early June of 2014, when the hitman failed to even try to kill Dan Markel, and the second trip to kill Dan Markel, the trip that culminated in the shooting of Dan Markel on July 18, 2014. There may be other reasons why the photo is significant, and that is what we are going to evaluate today. Again, all analysis is preliminary until we know all of the facts. So what do we know about the photo? Date taken: Sunday, June 15, 2014. People shown: Yindra Mascaro Velazquez, a long-term friend of Katherine Magbanua, Wendy Adelson, ex-wife of soon-to-be murder victim Dan Markel. Katherine Magbanua, ex-common-law wife of Sigfredo Garcia, one of the two now convicted hitmen who killed Dan Markel, then girlfriend of Charles Adelson, Wendy's brother, now convicted of having ordered the hit on his sister's ex-husband, Dan Markel. Photographer, unknown. Location, Miami Beach, Florida, outside the Continuum. Source, publication, unknown, but likely Wendy's cell phone, which she turned over to law enforcement for inspection during her police interrogation on July 18, 2014. Other possible sources could include social media, if the photo was ever published before it came into the possession of law enforcement. It is also possible that the photo was shared with all three ladies after it was taken. The analysis of this piece of evidence could be affected, of course, by information we do not know. But let's do an analysis with the information we do know. Let's talk about the circumstances of the photo and whether the photo was used in the conspiracy to kill Dan Markel. The possibilities vary from the photo being almost entirely unrelated to the murder of Dan Markel, to it having been taken and used in connection with the conspiracy to murder him. First possibility, an innocent photo. Under this possibility, the photo had nothing to do with the murder of Dan Markel. Rather, the Adelsons were excited to have an apartment at Continuum, a resort-style luxury condo on South Beach, and they wanted to show off their new place. Wendy was visiting from Tallahassee for Father's Day, and Charles wanted to see his parents as well. So a get-together was arranged for that Sunday afternoon at Continuum, and Charles invited his girlfriend Katie. Katie then asks whether she can bring her best friend Yindra along, and Charles says sure. They all get together, go to the beach, hang out, have fun, and at some point, when the ladies are lying down together tanning in the sun, one or more of the ladies decide to take a photo together, and someone else, likely another Adelson, takes the photo, likely using Wendy's phone. The photo is then shared among the ladies. However, none of them ever publish the photo on social media. Furthermore, Katie never shows the photo to Sigfredo Garcia. Under this first innocent scenario, the photo has no real connection to the murder of Dan Markel, in the sense that it was not used during the conspiracy for any purpose. At most, the photo is evidence that Katherine Magbanua knew Wendy Adelson and Donna Adelson. One can assume Donna and Harvey were there too, since it was Father's Day, and the photo was taken outside of their new condo. And it could be used as exculpatory evidence by another Adelson accused of having ordered the hit, with that Adelson's attorney suggesting that Wendy, Donna, or Harvey could have dealt directly with Katherine, for example. There are, of course, many other possibilities about what this piece of evidence means, possible scenarios that are much more nefarious. Years ago, I suggested the possibility that the photo was taken with the intent that Katherine Magbanua show the photo to Sigfredo Garcia, as corroboration for Katherine's story to Sigfredo that the hit job was being done for someone other than her boyfriend, Charles Adelson, that she was helping arrange this for Wendy. So let's look at this possibility and others. Let's assume this time that Charles Adelson is the only one hiring the hitmen. He is doing it for his mom, Donna, but he is the only one doing the hiring. So Charles asks his girlfriend Katherine if she can help him find someone, and she says yes. So Katherine helps Charles, and she gets her ex, Sigfredo Garcia, to agree to do the hit. Eventually, Sigfredo hires Luis Rivera to go along, and they travel to Tallahassee in early June of 2014 to carry out the hit on Dan Markel. However, for whatever reason, Sigfredo and Luis fail. They don't even make one attempt, and they return to Miami. Perhaps after Sigfredo returns to Miami, Sigfredo airs to Katherine his suspicion that the hit was ordered by Charles, her boyfriend. Then, after Katie tells Charlie about this, they decide to do this meetup with Wendy for a photo opportunity. And they come up with more lies to tell Sigfredo to convince him to go back to Tallahassee and do the job to kill Dan Markel. This is the type of situation I imagined when I first concluded that the reason for the meetup in June between Wendy and Katie was for that purpose, to create a photo that could be used by Katie to reconvince Sigfredo to do the hit. This scenario may even be a possible one even if Wendy was involved, the only difference being that Wendy would then be a willing participant in the efforts to reconvince the hitman, through Katie, to carry out the hit, to try again. However, new revelations since I made that original preliminary analysis call this conclusion into question. We now know about the recent move to Continuum, the luxury resort-style condominium on South Beach. This was Father's Day. Wendy was visiting. There was a good reason for Wendy and Charles to get together with Harvey and Donna to celebrate. It would make sense for Charles to invite Katie to come along, to show off the family's new place, and for Katie to invite her best friend along, Yindra, to show off the cool place that her boyfriend's family got. Furthermore, Katie's testimony at her proffers and trial only partially support my original analysis. At trial, Katie did say that she only dealt with Charles Adelson, that he gave her an envelope to give to the person she knew who could harm someone. She also said that Charles was the one pressuring her to pressure the hitman to do the job, and that Charles was the one she went to when the hitmen needed money for the trip to Tallahassee. At trial, Katherine also said that she lied to Sigfredo, that she was telling Sigfredo that they were doing the job for a lady because Sigfredo did not like her boyfriend Charles. That is consistent with what Sigfredo told an informant at jail and what Luis testified to, that they were doing the hit for the lady due to a custody fight. However, Katherine never testified to connect the photo with Wendy to her efforts to convince Sigfredo that the job was being done for a lady, at least not that I recall. It would have been nice if the detectives at her proffer had shown the photo to Katherine Magbanua and had asked her for all details she knew, but they did not do that. And the testimony at trial from Katie did not go into such details.
Is this you on the left side of the screen?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Right. And was this picture, where was this picture taken?
This was in South Beach. I believe the building that they were living at where Charlie's parents were living at.
Is that the Icon?
I don't think that was the Icon. It was somewhere in First and Ocean.
Okay, so a different residence.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And this photo, was this the first time you'd ever met Wendy, or had you already known Wendy before this photo?
I met her one time prior to this because I believe this was in Father's Day. So I met her around spring break when I had dinner with her and Jeffrey.
Okay. So the Yardbird restaurant?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So this was the second time you'd met her.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have a relationship with her outside of her being Charlie's sister?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you communicate with her by phone or through any apps or anything like that?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you receive any communication from her specifically about the homicide?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did Wendy ever give you any money or other gifts?
No, ma'am, she did not.
Did anybody pay you for your part in the murder other than Charlie Adelson?
No, ma'am, they did not.
All right. And the payments from Charlie Adelson, did those include the checks that were signed by his mother from
Yes,
the Adelson
ma'am.
Institute?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Did you perform any job at the Adelson Institute?
No, ma'am, I did not.
You didn't go up there and clean on the weekends?
No, ma'am, I did not.
So, while my original theory that the photo was used to convince Sigfredo that they were all working for Wendy, or a lady, may still pan out, this took a bit of a blow from the absence of supporting testimony from Katie. Of course, Katherine may be lying, or may not be telling the full truth. More on this later. Let's discuss another scenario. Let's assume Charles Adelson and Donna Adelson acted alone in ordering the hit, that Harvey and Wendy were not involved. They may have had concerns about the hitmen being caught, and that if the hitmen were caught, law enforcement would eventually go after the Adelsons. Thus, part of the defensive plan may have included muddying the waters by creating evidence that could point to other Adelsons who were in fact innocent. Maybe they did not want to point the finger at Harvey, but they were willing to create some evidence pointing to the main beneficiary of the hit, Wendy. They may have thought that this was harmless to Wendy because she really wasn't involved, but it would help shield Charles and Donna from prosecution. Under that scenario, the photo was taken by Charles or Donna, and the main purpose of it was for it to exist so that law enforcement would eventually find it, and for law enforcement to see it at some point, if they were investigating the murder, had found a connection to Katherine Magbanua and suspected the Adelsons. This way, there would be more than one Adelson connected to Katherine, not just Charlie. There are, of course, many other scenarios that could work. That is the problem when you try to solve a murder from pieces of evidence. How can investigators figure out what is the reality? They would be looking for as much information as they can get. How? By finding out who took the photo and how the photo was used, by interviewing the people in the photo and the person who took the photo, and by determining whether the photo was published anywhere on social media or otherwise. Investigators can get closer to the truth. The more information one has, the better the chances that the evidence is being interpreted properly. I would love to hear details from Yindra, for example, about what was being discussed that day. I would also love to hear from Sigfredo about whether he had been shown that photo before, in June or early July of 2014, by Katie. Again, more evidence can come in on this photo, and the new information may help us get to a stronger analysis of the value of this piece of evidence. How about prosecutors and defense attorneys? What do they do with such evidence? They also may not know the precise meaning of the evidence, particularly where there are many possible interpretations for that evidence, but they also know that visual evidence can be powerful. Here, Georgia Kappelman, the lead prosecutor in the case, used a conservative approach. Georgia simply showed the photo to the jury, through Wendy, and let the jury make its own connections. That is a smart approach. She did not have to argue anything about the photo. She let the jury make its own conclusions.
There's a photograph, I'm sure you recall, of you on the beach with Katherine Magbanua. Do you recall when that photo was taken?
I do. It was Father's Day 2014, so 9 years ago.
June 15th of 2014?
That sounds right.
So about a month before the murder?
That sounds right.
Where was this photo taken?
It was in Miami. I went down to visit my dad for Father's Day.
Approaching and showing you what I've marked as states 35. Is this that photograph? And I've attached the data associated with it.
Yes.
Okay. Is fair and accurate copy of that photograph?
Yes.
Judge, I'd ask to move into evidence states 35.
Okay. States 35. No.
Permission to publish.
You met?
All right. Is that you in the center?
That's me.
Which one's Katherine Magbanua?
The one on the left, our left in the picture.
How long had Ms. Magbanua been dating your brother at the time this photo was taken?
I have no idea.
How many times had you met Ms. Magbanua at the time this was taken?
I think once before.
Okay. How many times did you hang out with her total?
Just these 2 times. Once at the dinner when I met her, and then once at the beach for an hour.
Was the relationship between your brother and Katherine Magbanua serious, if you know?
I don't know. I mean, 10 years ago, was it serious? Not too serious?
It never stood out to you during that time frame as like, oh, this is the one.
No.
All right. So you mentioned you thought Whitney Kick was after Katherine Magbanua. What about June Mchinda? Do you know which one that is?
When you say, do I know which one that is? She's not in the picture.
No, ma'am. You're one of your brother's girlfriends, June Mchinda. Do you know her?
I met someone named June.
Okay. And would you agree that was also after Katherine Magbanua?
Yes, that would have been after.
When did you learn that Katherine Magbanua was blackmailing your brother for the murder of your ex-husband?
Today.
So he never told you?
No.
You testified in Katherine Magbanua's murder trial last year, didn't you?
I did, yes.
And she was convicted.
She was convicted, yes.
Of murder.
Yes, of murder.
Of murdering Dan Markel.
Of murdering my children's father, yes.
A crime for which she apparently is innocent because she was just a conduit for Sigfredo Garcia. Did you learn that today along with all of us?
Well, I learned that someone made that argument. I don't know whether it's true or not true.
Okay. You have no knowledge of it.
I have no knowledge.
In all the years this has been pending,
In all of the years this has been pending.
your brother has known who killed your child's father, and you didn't know.
I did not know.
How about the defense? Dan Rashbaum, in defending Charles Adelson, tried to both make and destroy the state's subliminal arguments about Wendy when it presented evidence at trial that suggested her involvement, including the photo we are discussing in this video. He suggested that Georgia was trying to prove Wendy's involvement, and in doing so, was relying on bad evidence, such as the beach photo. He also suggested that the investigators and prosecutors did a great job with the other defendants, the real killers, but had tunnel vision when it came to Charles Adelson. Thus, he argued that the state misinterpreted much of the evidence, like this particular photo. From his perspective, any argument that the photo is evidence of participation in the murder of Dan Markel would be ridiculous. Most defense attorneys would argue that the state is overreaching, is desperate, that there is a totally innocent explanation for the photo, and that there is no evidence that the photo was used in the conspiracy to kill Dan Markel. They would point out that the photo remained on Wendy's phone, assuming she did not try to delete it and that it was taken from her phone, and that Wendy did not try to delete it. They would point out to the absence of evidence, the lack of any testimony directly connecting the photo to the conspiracy, perhaps pointing out that the state did not even ask Katherine Magbanua whether the photo had any connection. They would point to other possible pieces of evidence to show that the photo was innocent, perhaps evidence that the photo was shared with the three ladies and that each texted back a huge thanks. It would be even better for the defense if they could get testimony from those involved in the photo to try to put the photo in a proper context, to demonstrate that the state has taken a ridiculous position about this piece of evidence. You have to remember that the state is creating a story of what happened from limited evidence. Thus, it is not unusual for the state or investigators to sometimes misinterpret a piece of evidence that seems to support its position, perhaps due to confirmation bias, or perhaps due to the fact that the piece of evidence is vague, with both nefarious and innocent interpretations being possible, and that the state chooses to present the piece of evidence as nefarious in light of all of the other evidence that supports the conclusion that the defendant did the crime. The defense, on the other hand, will attack any piece of evidence it can attack, and will focus on such supposed misinterpreted pieces of evidence that it can attack more easily, hoping that by taking down some of the evidence against their client, the jurors will give less credibility to other evidence presented by the state that may not be as susceptible to attack. Now, as promised, let's go back to Katherine Magbanua and her failure to connect the photo at the beach with the conspiracy to murder Dan Markel. Here are a few things for you to consider. First of all, of course, the state wants Katherine Magbanua to tell the truth, not to make up a story that supports the state's case. But at the same time, you have to consider that it is very difficult to acknowledge one's involvement in such a heinous crime, and there is also the fact that one of the other participants is her ex, Sigfredo Garcia, the father of her children. Thus, while Katherine is likely being truthful now that she is a cooperating witness, there are other factors that are clearly affecting how much she is willing to say. Often in her proffer, she requested permission to speak to Sigfredo Garcia, as if she wanted his approval to give out all of the details. And she wanted him to also cooperate, so they could both benefit from cooperation. Additionally, during her proffer, She admitted how hard it is for her to accept and acknowledge her involvement in something so heinous as the murder of Dan Markel. She often indicates that she tried to block her memory of her involvement and that she feels that she shamed her family and her family name. Katherine Magbanua's story now involves her involvement in the murder, but in a much less direct role than suggested by the evidence against her. There are two possibilities. One is that she is telling the full truth and that her role was much more limited. But there is another possibility as well, that for some or all of these reasons, these pressures that are bearing down upon her, she is incapable of telling the full truth and is only telling a partial truth, staying as close as she can to the full truth, but also minimizing her role as much as possible. The photo at the beach was a great opportunity for Katherine to use a piece of evidence that she knew about and spin it to create more value in her testimony. If she connected the beach photo to the conspiracy, if she testified that she showed the beach photo to Sigfredo Garcia when she was trying to convince him to resume the efforts to kill Dan Markel, her acknowledgement on the witness stand that she did try to convince Sigfredo that they were working for someone else would have been much stronger and memorable. Instead, she only admitted, after being repeatedly prodded by prosecutor Georgia Kappelman, to telling Sigfredo that the hit had been requested by someone other than Charles, with no details given by her of what she said or how she said it. So why didn't Katie go there? Why didn't she connect the photo to the conspiracy? There are several possibilities. First, it could be that the truth is that, as far as Katherine knows, the photo has no relationship to the conspiracy. In other words, the meetup with Wendy and the photo were not used by Katie in any way in discussions about the conspiracy with Sigfredo Garcia or otherwise. Second, it could be that Katie is trying to minimize her role. Third, it could be that she does not want to tell the full truth until she knows that Sigfredo will corroborate what she has to say and is therefore giving a little detail as she can get away with. Fourth, it could be she does not remember what she did vis-a-vis the photo, particularly if she was abusing substances. There are other possibilities, of course. A murder investigation like this one involves hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of evidence like this one. Investigators at first and ultimately prosecutors have to cull through all of the evidence and put a story together, a story that will make sense for the jury. That story may have some mistakes or weaknesses, and the defense will try to exploit those mistakes and weaknesses. A great prosecutor will take that into consideration and will therefore avoid presenting weak evidence to the jurors. For example, many people, even Georgia Kappelman, there may be some significance in the fact that Wendy Adelson was wearing an owl shirt on the day her ex-husband was shot. In some cultures, an owl is an omen of death. Barn owls belong to a family of owls called Titanidae, which comes from the Greek word tuto, which means night owl. The man who prosecutors argued was the shooter, the main hitman, also went by the name of Tuto. Also, the other hitman, Luis Rivera, aka Tato, testified that while in Tallahassee for the hit, he posted a photo of a Tallahassee owl on Instagram, and that Sigfredo Tuto asked him to take it down. Georgia, however, decided not to go there, perhaps in fear that a good defense attorney would ridicule that evidence. Then again, she might decide to use that if Wendy is ever charged. We shall see. Ultimately, we do not have enough information at this time to know the precise significance of the photo. The photo has been used as evidence in all 3 trials involving the murder of Dan Markel. Each time, it was introduced as evidence through the testimony of Wendy Adelson. Certainly its timing and the people in it are significant. The photo was taken in between the first attempt and the successful hit on Dan Markel. Wendy, the ex-wife, was the main beneficiary of the hit. Katherine Magbanua was convicted as the middle woman who helped set up the hit. Yindra did not do anything wrong, but happened to be the babysitter that Katherine found for the evening of July 18, 2014, the day of the hit. What are your thoughts about this photo? Do you know any additional information about it that could help us in our reevaluation of the evidence in this case? One of the purposes of this video is to show what goes into the analysis of a piece of evidence and how an advocate, a lawyer, would develop arguments from that evidence. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want more videos like this one, you know what to do. Thanks for watching, Mentor Lawyer and Ladybug.